The coziness of our tiny rented flat and the warmth of my father's grin are ingrained in my earliest recollections. My name is Carla, and up until the age of 13, my life was just typical, in the greatest sense of the word. James, my father, was the type of man who turned everything into an adventure. Despite our little apartment, he transformed our living room into a fort on wet weekends and our small balcony into a fairy garden. Sarah, Mom, was different. She was more reserved and constantly wished for a larger home and a more opulent lifestyle. However, in those days, their differences seemed to perfectly balance each other out. "Carla, sweetie, would you like to spend the weekend at Grandpa's?" Mom would frequently inquire, and I would seize the opportunity. Grandpa Richard's house seemed like a second home to me, not because I didn't want to be home. There were countless nooks and crannies to explore in this lovely two-story Victorian home with creaky hardwood floorboards. "Your mother needs her alone time with your father," Grandpa would say when I would show up at his house, grinning knowingly, "and I need my time with my favorite granddaughter." More than the grown-ups around me recognized, I was a sensitive youngster. I realized that Mom and Dad had their own connection to maintain, and that she occasionally needed distance. It didn't harm me, on the contrary, it gave me a sense of maturity. Besides, they were amazing weekends spent with Grandpa. He would prepare the finest pancakes in the world, educate me about money management. He was a retired bank manager, and share anecdotes of Dad's early years. He once told me, "You know, Carla, as we sat on his veranda eating breakfast, your mother dreams of a house like this. However, what is more significant than a large home, a loving household?" I understood even at that early age and nodded. Despite its modest size, our flat was brimming with affection. When Dad got home from work at the insurance firm, he would embrace me and kiss Mom until she giggled in spite of herself. During such moments, our small room seemed endless. However, unexpected changes might happen in life. Dad started losing weight quickly when I was 13. He first made light of it by claiming that he was at last getting in shape. His eyes, however, sent a different message. Mom's expression got more anxious as the frequency of the doctor's visits increased. Dad used to say, "It's just a phase," while feebly ruffling my hair. "I'll be back to my old self in no time." However, he wasn't. He was engulfed like a wildfire by the illness, severe pancreatic cancer. My father, who used to be robust and energetic, disappeared in a matter of months. I could witness Mom's internal disintegration as I watched helplessly as she attempted to keep things together. I will never be able to forget the last time I spoke to Dad. His hand was hardly strong enough to clasp mine as he lay in his hospital bed. He murmured, "Look after your mother for me, Princess, and follow Grandpa's instructions. He knows more than all of us put together." Living in a fog was how I described the year following Dad's passing. Mom became so depressed that she was hardly able to look at me. I suppose I made her think of him too much. I'm really grateful for Grandpa Richard. In the maelstrom that had overtaken our life, he became my rock and my haven. Grandpa's house became my new normal and was no longer only a stopgap measure. I would wake up every morning in what had been Dad's former room, surrounded by pictures and awards from his early years. Grandpa did his best to replace the vacuum created by both of my parents' deaths, one via death, the other through grief, by making sure I continued to attend school and helping me with my homework. Sometimes Mom would call, but her voice always sounded aloof and uninterested. Her visits were much less frequent. She would hardly look at me before hurrying away. I made the decision to lower my expectations. Then everything changed precisely 1 year and 2 months after Dad passed away. One bright Saturday morning, I nearly didn't recognize Mom when she arrived at Grandpa's door. The mourning widow in black had vanished, to be replaced by a person with a fresh haircut and a bright yellow clothing. Happiness was radiating from her face. Carla, get your belongings, my dear. You're coming home, she said, bouncing like a teenager on her heels. Confused, I glanced at Grandpa. He appeared to be as shocked as I was. Mom's happy babbling about everything and nothing filled the trip back to our place. Sitting next to a stranger who just so happened to look like my mother was like that. However, the biggest surprise was when we entered our flat. A towering man and a girl who appeared to be perhaps 3 years younger than me were standing in our tiny living room. When Mom virtually danced to their side, they both grinned sheepishly. Meet Robert and Emma, his daughter Carla. Emma is going to be your new sister, and Robert is my fiancé. Mom grinned and held Robert's arm, saying, "We're getting married soon." The room began to swirl. What? When did this occur? I stumbled. Oh, we've been dating for a while now. Mom waved her hand dismissively. I didn't tell anyone about our relationship. You know how people can get jealous and judgmental. It was better this way. I stumbled to my old room, barely registering that it had been redecorated. With trembling hands, I pulled out my phone and called Grandpa. He answered on the first ring. "Mom has a fiancé," I whispered into the phone. "She's getting married and didn't tell anyone. There's a man here and his daughter." Grandpa arrived within 20 minutes. I could hear the conversation from my room as he confronted Mom. "Sarah, how could you do this without telling anyone? Without telling your own daughter?" "Dad, I'm happy for the first time in forever." Mom's voice was defensive. "I've decided to start fresh, to live again. James would want that. He wouldn't want me to waste away in depression forever." There was a long pause before Grandpa spoke again, his voice heavy with resignation. "I hope you'll be happy, Sarah. Just don't forget you have a family who needs you too." The 3 months before the wedding felt like living in some twisted alternate reality. Our small apartment seemed even more cramped with 4 people instead of 2. But that wasn't the worst part. What really got to me was watching Emma, my stepsister, wrap my mother around her finger. "Mom, can you help me with my hair?" Emma would say, and my mother would drop everything, including our conversation, to assist her. The way she said Mom made my skin crawl, especially since she'd only known my mother for a few months. Mom seemed blind to everything except Emma. When Emma mentioned she loved ballet, Mom immediately signed her up for private lessons, something I'd begged for years ago but was told we couldn't afford. When Emma complained about her old phone being too slow, Mom bought her the latest iPhone model. When Emma wanted to redecorate her side of the bedroom we now shared, Mom took her shopping and spent hundreds of dollars on new bedding, curtains, and decorations. "Your sister needs to feel welcome here," Mom would say whenever I tried to point out the disparity in treatment. "Stepsister," I correct her, "and I need to feel welcome too." She'd just shake her head and walk away. The wedding day itself was a modest affair at a local venue, but Mom glowed with happiness. I stood there in my bridesmaid dress, watching as she fussed over Emma's hair and makeup, barely sparing me a glance. Throughout the ceremony and reception, Mom kept Emma close, holding her hand and introducing her to everyone as my beautiful daughter. I might as well have been a waitress for all the attention I received. Grandpa gave them a check for $5,000 as a wedding gift, a generous amount by any standard, but I overheard Mom's reaction when she cornered him by the restrooms. "Really, Dad?" "A check," she hissed, her face flushed from champagne and anger. "I was counting on you giving us your house. We're a proper family now. We need the space. That apartment is too small for 4 people. Grandpa remained calm, though I could see the disappointment in his eyes. "Sarah, you're rushing everything. First the sudden engagement, now this. That house isn't just property to be handed over on a whim. Besides, it's where Carla spends half her time now." "Oh, so that's it. You're playing favorites now." "No, I'm being practical. And maybe you should be too." I slipped away before they could notice me, but the conversation haunted me. My mother had changed so much that I barely recognized her anymore. She'd created this new perfect family in her mind, with Emma as the star child and Robert as the ideal husband. There didn't seem to be any room left for me. So I did what any unwanted person would do. I spent more and more time at Grandpa's house. At least there, I didn't have to pretend to be happy about being replaced. 4 years have passed since that moment, and I was about to graduate from high school. Living in that apartment had become a master class in avoiding conflict. I'd learned to be quiet, to take up as little space as possible, and to spend most of my time either in my room or at Grandpa's. One evening, during our weekly family dinner, another exercise in pretending we were one big happy family, I decided to share my plans for the future. "I've been accepted to State University," I announced, trying to keep my voice steady. "I want to study finance and business management." The silence that followed was deafening. Mom put down her fork, exchanged a look with Robert, and cleared her throat. "Actually, Carla, I think it would be better if you started working after graduation. College isn't necessary for everyone." I stared at her, bewildered. "What are you talking about? Dad set up a college fund for me before he died. He always wanted me to get higher education." Mom shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "About that fund, Robert and I have been talking, and we think it would be better to save that money for Emma's education. She's incredibly talented, you know, top of her class and everything. She'll need a good university education to reach her full potential." Robert nodded sagely. "Emma has shown remarkable aptitude in her studies. It would be the right thing to do, Carla. You could work for a few years, save up, and then go to college if you still want to." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. The college fund, the last gift my father had arranged for me, they wanted to take that too. "That money is mine," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "Dad left it specifically for my education. You can't just give it to Emma." "Don't be selfish, Carla," Mom said, her eyes filling with tears. "Emma is your sister." "Stepsister," I snapped, standing up so quickly my chair fell backward. "And that money is the last thing I have from Dad. You've given her everything else. My room, your attention, your love. But you can't have this. I won't let you take it." "How dare you?" Mom was crying now, but I could see the manipulation in her tears. "After everything we've done for you, Emma needs. Emma needs. What about what I need? What about what Dad wanted for me?" The argument ended with a door slamming in tears, mostly Mom's, as she wailed about my selfishness. After that night, the apartment became even more hostile. No one spoke to me unless absolutely necessary. Emma smirked whenever she passed me in the hallway, and Robert wouldn't even look in my direction. When graduation day came, I wasn't surprised to find only Grandpa in the audience. He cheered loud enough for 4 people when they called my name, and his proud smile meant more to me than anything my new family could have offered. That evening, I packed everything I owned into 3 cardboard boxes and my old suitcase. Grandpa helped me load them into his car. "Your room is always ready for you, sweetheart," he said as we drove away from the apartment. "Always has been, always will be." I didn't look back as we left. There was nothing there for me anymore. College life became my escape. I threw myself into my studies, determined to make my father and Grandpa proud. The business and finance courses fascinated me, and I found myself excelling in ways that would have made Dad smile. Every evening I called Grandpa to share what I'd learned. "Tell me again about derivatives," he'd say, even though he knew more about finance than my professors. "I love hearing you explain it." But as my college years progressed, I noticed changes in Grandpa's voice during our calls. He got tired more easily, and his usual sharp wit sometimes seemed dulled. During my visits home, I caught him wincing when he stood up or rubbing his chest when he thought I wasn't looking. "It's just age catching up with me," he'd say whenever I asked about his health. "Nothing to worry about, sweetheart." But I did worry. I started calling him twice a day instead of once, and I'd drive home every weekend I could, not just on holidays. We'd sit in his kitchen, drinking tea and talking about everything and nothing, just like we used to. Sometimes I'd catch him looking at me with such intense love that it made my throat tight. It was the middle of my final semester when Mom called. I almost didn't answer. It was the first time she'd called in 4 years, but something made me pick up. "Grandpa died last night," she said, her voice flat and emotionless. "The funeral is on Thursday at 2 p.m., Hartford Funeral Home." The phone slipped from my hand. I don't remember much of what happened next, just that my roommate found me curled up on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Thursday came too quickly and not quickly enough. The funeral home was exactly the kind of place Grandpa would have chosen. Understated but elegant, with large windows letting in natural light. I arrived early, my black dress feeling too tight, my skin too sensitive. Everything wrong because Grandpa wasn't there to make it right. I expected to see Mom and her family, but they weren't there. Instead, Mr. Harrison, Grandpa's friend from his banking days, was organizing everything. "They're running a bit late," he said when I asked. "Your mother called to say they'd be delayed." The service was beautiful, filled with people from Grandpa's life sharing stories about his kindness, integrity, and humor. I sat in the front row, alone with my grief, until halfway through the service when I heard the back door open. Mom swept in with Robert and Emma, all in perfectly coordinated black outfits. They took seats in the far back, and Mom didn't even glance in my direction. Her face was set in a mask of appropriate grief, but her eyes were already darting around the room, assessing, calculating. I turned back to face the front, my tears now burning with both grief and anger. Even here, even now, she couldn't acknowledge me. She couldn't put aside her pettiness for one day to mourn her own father. After the funeral service, I drove to Grandpa's house, my home for the past 4 years, only to stop short at the sight that greeted me. Scattered across the front lawn like worthless debris were garbage bags filled with my belongings, my clothes, my books, my photo albums. Everything from my room had been unceremoniously thrown out. Some bags had split open, spilling my life across the grass. With trembling hands, I tried my key in the front door. It wouldn't turn. The lock had been changed. I was still standing there, key uselessly in hand, when the door swung open. Mom stood in the doorway, wearing the same black dress from the funeral, but now with an expression of triumph rather than grief. "Oh, good, you're here to collect your things," she said, as if she was doing me a favor. "This is my house now. Dad's finally gone, and as his only child, I'm the rightful heir. I've already had the locks changed. We're moving in tonight." I stared at her, unable to process the cruelty of it all. "You couldn't even wait until after the funeral. These are my things, my home." "No, this is my home now," she cut me off sharply. "And you'd better take your stuff quickly, or it's going in the dumpster. I need to clear the space for Emma's things." She smiled coldly. "She's getting your old room, by the way. She's always wanted a bigger bedroom." I felt numb as I gathered my belongings, stuffing everything back into the torn bags and trying to collect the scattered photos of Dad and Grandpa from where they'd fallen in the grass. My mother stood in the doorway the entire time, watching me like a security guard, making sure I didn't try to steal anything. The drive back to my college dorm was a blur of tears and disbelief. My roommate helped me carry everything up, not asking questions when she saw my state. A week later, I received a call from a law firm. "Miss Johnson, this is Mr. Anderson from Anderson and Partners Law Firm. I'm your grandfather's notary. We need you to come in for the reading of his will. Would Thursday at 10 o'clock a.m. work for you?" I agreed, though I couldn't see the point. Mom had made it clear she was the heir to everything. When I arrived at the notary's office that Thursday, Mom, Robert, and Emma were already there, seated like royalty in the leather chairs. Emma was examining her manicure while Robert scrolled through his phone. Mom's eyes narrowed when she saw me. "What are you doing here?" she asked loudly enough for everyone in the office to hear. "You're clearly not needed for this. We're handling family business." Mr. Anderson adjusted his glasses and began reading from the document in front of him. "I, Richard James Mitchell, being of sound mind and body, declare this to be my last will and testament." He started with the formal language, but I saw Mom already smiling triumphantly. That smile froze when Mr. Anderson continued. "To my beloved granddaughter, Carla Johnson, I leave my house at 1542 Oak Street, along with all its contents, and my entire savings account containing $475,000. The room went deadly silent for a moment. Then Mom's voice shattered it. "What? This can't be right," she shrieked, snatching the document from Mr. Anderson's hands, her eyes scanning frantically. "Where's my part? I'm his daughter." Mr. Anderson calmly retrieved the will. "Mrs. Waters, your father's wishes are quite clear. He leaves everything to Miss Carla Johnson. There is no provision for you in the will." "This is impossible." Mom's face turned scarlet. "She manipulated him. She poisoned him against me. I'll sue. I'll contest this will." "The will is ironclad," Mr. Anderson stated firmly. "Your father had it properly witnessed and notarized 6 months ago. He was of completely sound mind, as attested by his doctor. Any attempt to contest it would be futile and expensive." Mom's strategy suddenly shifted. The rage in her eyes transformed into tears as she turned to me. "Carla, sweetie, please," she pleaded, her voice honey-sweet now. "We've already given up our apartment. We moved everything out yesterday. We have nowhere to go. You can't just throw us out on the street. We're family." I stood up, holding the folder Mr. Anderson had just handed me. Inside were the deed to the house, ownership transfer documents, and all the legal paperwork confirming my ownership of the property. "Family?" I asked quietly. "Like how you threw my belongings onto the lawn before Grandpa was even in his grave. Like how you tried to steal my college fund. Like how you've treated me for the past 4 years. That was different. We were." "This is your problem, not mine," I cut her off, turning to leave. "I suggest you start looking for a new apartment." I drove straight to Grandpa's house, my house now, but I couldn't get in. I pulled out my phone and called a locksmith, explaining the situation. When he arrived, I showed him my freshly notarized ownership documents. "I'm the legal owner of this house," I explained, showing him the paperwork. "I need you to open these locks and then change them to new ones. I want to be the only one with the keys." I collected all of Mom's, Robert's, and Emma's belongings while the locksmith was at work, including the clothing they had previously unpacked, the amenities they had taken from the restrooms, and the posters Emma had affixed to the wall of my former bedroom. Like they had done with my belongings, I packed everything into rubbish bags. I hauled all of their luggage onto the front porch and put them in a tidy arrangement once the locksmith was done and gave me the new keys. I was aware of the situation's symmetry. Where mine had been a few days before, their possessions now sat. I recognized the sound of Mom's car rolling into the driveway as the sun started to drop. Grandpa's favorite place to read his morning paper was the living room window, and I looked through it as their emotions transpired just as I had anticipated. "What is this?" Through the shuttered windows, Mom's cry was audible. "Our belongings. Everything we own is outdoors." As they got closer, I stood firmly in the entryway and opened the door. Mom was furious and her face was flushed. Emma had already started to cry theatrically, and Robert appeared to have swallowed something nasty. How dare you? Mom bounded up the stairs of the porch. Now we call this place home. You cannot harm us in this way. I can, in fact. Now, legally and legitimately, this is my home. You must get your things and depart. We have nowhere to go, Emma sobbed. I calmly retorted, you ought to have considered that before giving up your apartment. Not my problem. I resisted Mom's attempt to shove me inside the home. Carla, get moving. This is absurd. This is the home of my father. No, now it's my home, and I'll phone the police to report you for trespassing if you don't leave right away with your belongings. All of these bags then proceed directly to the dumpster. I took my phone out. Mom, it's your decision. Similar to how you offered me an option regarding my belongings a few days ago. Do you recall? As they packed their belongings, the following few minutes were characterized by threats and profanity. Emma continued pleading, I'll regret this, while Mom alternated between sobbing and yelling about how unjust everything was. Robert whispered to himself that he would challenge the will. Mom gave me one more look as they packed the last luggage into their car. You are not my daughter. Your dad would be embarrassed by you. I gave a sorrowful grin. No, Mother. The fact that I finally advocated for myself would make my father pleased. Goodbye. 6 months have passed since then. I'm now in my last semester and will graduate with honors. A charming young family is renting the property. Grandpa would have been pleased to see me save money from their rent payments each month. That first night, when everyone had gone, I discovered his note in the study safe. It said, My dearest Carla first, *, you have already dealt with your mother's response to my will if you are reading this. I apologize for putting you through that, but I was too familiar with Sarah. I was aware of her intended course of action. You possess both my business acumen and your father's honesty. Make good use of both. You may do whatever you want with the house. Just swear to me that the family pictures will remain in the attic. Some memories, even the unpleasant ones, are worth preserving *. I fulfilled that promise, as well as the ones I had given to Dad and to him. I'm now concentrating on the future, letting go of the past, but retaining the knowledge it gave me. Family isn't always what you were born into. Sometimes it's the people who support, encourage, and believe in you. Somewhere in the city, Mom, Robert, and Emma still reside. I've heard that they ultimately got a new flat. They've made a few attempts to reach me, generally when they're in need of something, but I never get back to them. We should close certain chapters of our existence.